Thinking about food. Thinking about food.
Well, hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Imago Nutrition Podcast, where we answer your questions and do our best to bring you practical nutrition strategies so that you and your family can flourish. And so we've got a great question today. If any of you are out there are parents and have highly active children, or you're an adult and don't have kids, but you're highly active, you're highly active. We've got some nutritional strategies around activity, post-activity, fueling energy and performance for kids, but this also translates to adults. So if you don't have kids, stick around. We've still got some, I think, great insight for you on this question. And so with that, if you have a question, you can always head over to our website and submit a question. It may become a topic of an episode, and you can do that by going to imagonutrition.com, IMAGO, nutrition.com/podcast. So you can go there. There's a little form. You can just type your question. You can punch it through. It'll come to us, and we sort through those questions, and that's how we generate some of the content here for the podcast, because we always want this podcast to be real people answering real questions from real people, and that's what we're doing. And so with that, we've got a great question from Stacia in Missouri, or Missouri, as some people call it, right? And so Stacia... Danielle's actually in Missouri, so I'm making a fool out of myself. So Stacia in Missouri says, or asks, what are some tips and tricks to optimize nutrition and energy for my 9-year-old son, who is very active and plays 2 different club sports? We are constantly on the go to practices and games, and it can be hard to know what to eat before and after. What are some things that I can also use with him to help him understand why nutrition is important in helping feel and play better? So I think as former athletes and still very active parents with kids that are very active, Danielle and I love this question. Thanks for asking, Stacia. Danielle, why don't you take us into this and start looking at how to fuel this child's activity?
Couple different parts of the question. One is how to fuel and do these things quick and on the go, or be prepared for the meal planning ahead of time, so it's ready when you get home, or bringing it with you. What are some convenient things to bring along? And then the other part of the question is how to talk to your kids about eating healthy and why that's important. So I think the first one, with the sports nutrition, there's lots of things to think about. Obviously, you have to consider the child's food preferences or your food preferences if we're thinking about your activity levels as well, and what works for you. Not everything is going to work for everyone. There are a couple of things that really stimulate the GI tract, fat and fiber. So if you have a high fat or a high fiber meal prior or too close to activity, it can really cause some discomfort. So watching those 2 things would be one of my key points to think about. And Mark, I think you have a lot of information on this, if you'd like to share that.
Yeah, great point. So I just want to echo what Danielle said. First thing I would say is learn what works for him. So I have a 9-year-old who's very active. He's currently in flag football. We're recording this in April of 22, and he's in his spring season. He used to play baseball in the spring. They switched to flag football. Of course, we're very active over the summer, and then he plays soccer in the fall, and also indoor soccer in the winter. So totally know where you're coming from. And so first thing I would say, and this goes for adults as well, we'll keep it focused on the actual question, but keep in mind this advice this is human advice, it's not necessarily age specific, okay, with certain nuances. But number one, you've got to just learn what works for him in terms of food and in terms of timing. So Danielle was a D1 swimmer. I was a D3 track guy, and then I switched to rugby in college. So, but I was a 3-sport athlete in high school, and I know that different foods and different timings were optimal for me, even different for each sport, right? So like different sports, like eating before a soccer game was different than eating before a track meet where I was a jumper and I just had to sprint a couple times and long jump into a big sand pit, right? So it's a little different, and that was definitely different than wrestling. Okay, so and then Danielle's found foods that work for her and a timing system that worked for her ahead of swimming and other sports and activities. So number one, just learning the foods that he likes within some of the context that we're going to talk about, but then also the timing. We get this question a lot, like even as adults, like people are like, how long should I how long before a workout or weightlifting session should I eat? The question is, it depends. Are you lifting really early in the morning? I can't expect you to have a meal 3 hours before that workout if you're working out at 5 a.m. because you are at work by 6, So think about both food and timing and what works. And we'll talk a little bit about this. We'll give you some examples. So what I would say on that 2 to 3 hours thing, if the activity is a bit later in the day, it's not first thing in the morning, think about a full meal 2 to 3 hours prior to the activity, the game, the event, etc. And what I mean by a full meal is really just kind of back to some of the macronutrient stuff that we talk about quite often. Carbohydrates as a primary energy source, protein as a recovery and growth, tissue development, and fats for nutrient absorption. So if it's 2 to 3 hours prior, feel free to have a full meal with nutrient-dense, carbohydrate-driven foods, protein-driven foods, and healthy fats, okay? If it's less than an hour, exactly what Danielle said, and I just onboarded just a few weeks ago a marathon runner. So one of the current clients that is working with our company is a mom that runs marathons. And exactly what you said, some of the fiber, some of the fat stuff can start to become a disadvantage closer to the event. So if you're talking about within an hour of the event, focus on scaling down the portions a little bit. Of course, you don't have a full meal necessarily, and you want to think about focusing primarily just carbs and protein. Okay, that fat becomes a little more of a disadvantage the closer you get to that that event, particularly endurance events or running events for the GI stimulation that you referenced to. So, how does that sound, Danielle? Anything to add to that? I've got some examples within these windows. Yes,
please share those examples.
Yeah, so I've got a couple examples. And we were talking about it just before we did the show a little bit. We're just kind of running through our notes. And part of me was like, I don't know what your child likes, so it's kind of hard to give examples. And I deal mostly with adults. But Danielle was like, look, let's not assume that children can't eat some of these same things. We're talking about nutrient-dense foods, okay? So again, here are just a couple examples per the windows, the food and the timing component of pre-activity. And then we'll talk about post-activity as well. So if you're talking 2 to 3 hours, like I said, we're looking for all three macros. Couple examples. I'll give you 3 examples of meals that you could have 2 to 3 hours prior to activity. Okay, a sandwich on whole grain bread with some sort of lean protein and a side salad. Very simple, very standard, right? A second one would be something like an egg omelet with whole grain toast. Top that toast with avocado spread and a cup of fruit. You can see how we're starting to stack protein, carbs, and fat. Third option could be just a lean protein of some sort, whatever his preferred lean protein is, brown rice, and some sort of roasted veggie. Okay, so these are just well-balanced, full circle, macronutrient, nutrient-dense options. That
sounds delicious.
I'm all down with this. So if he doesn't want it, I'll just come over and have it instead. So if we're talking within 2 hours, here's a couple options. I've got 4. If we're inside of 2 hours of an event, number 1 could be a protein smoothie, and you can make that with milk, yogurt, banana, and some mixed berries. Delicious, nutrient-dense, terrific way. Kids tend to love smoothies, right? And that's just a delicious way to get those macronutrients in within 2 hours. Another option would be like a whole grain cereal and milk. Could be that simple. A third option could be a cup of oatmeal topped with banana and sliced almonds. I'm a big oatmeal fan, oats guy. I eat them cold. I eat them raw. I don't even cook them or anything like that. Love that option too. Children might as well. Another one would be, the fourth option would be like a natural almond butter and fruit preserve sandwich on a whole grain bread of some sort. So you can see how now we're focused in within that 2 hours, starting to narrow down some of our nutrients as we get closer to the event. And then if you're looking for a couple more, if you're inside an hour of the activity, okay, so it's 3:02, that game starts at 4 o'clock, looking for, again, smaller portions, really focused on carbohydrates and protein. One option could just be Greek yogurt and fruit. It's that simple. Greek yogurt, throw the favorite berry in there, favorite fruit, diced banana, right? Bananas are terrific. Berries are terrific. Favorite fruit. Just go gangbusters on that. You can't eat enough fruit. Okay. Number 2 would be a little bit more on the go. Could be a nutrition bar of some sort or a protein bar. Think brands like Kind Bar or Think Bar. Just be looking for both protein and fairly nutrient dense ingredients in that bar. Again, we're looking for a good mix of carbohydrate and protein in that. And there's some companies doing some pretty good stuff, even in the nutrition bar space, right?
And for that, I would say not more than like 10 grams of protein there.
There you go. Yep. Yep, we really are. And by the way, I mean, it was fun to go through kind of a nutrition protocol, of course, with the marathon runner. And, you know, I've got her at times, depending on her where she is in her training, somewhere between 55, 65, up to 70% of her intake is carbohydrates based on her training cycle, right? And that's what you're doing. So think about that. As it's getting closer and closer, you're really focused more on getting those easy to digest, more quote unquote simple carbs. Those are not bad things. People like have this notion of, oh, it's a simple carb, I only eat complex carbs. And, okay, well, that's not rooted in any science. But relax a little bit there, buddy. Like a simple carbohydrate before an event is awesome. I'm 41 years old at the time of this recording, and I still play competitive soccer. I play in what's known as an old man soccer league. So I play in a league that's over 40 years old, and I still play competitive soccer every week on Sundays. And I am looking for loading up my body with glycogen stores. I'm loading up my body the day before and the day of with a predominantly carbohydrate-driven intake. Why? It fuels those 40 minutes that this 41-year-old has to go out there and run around like a maniac kicking a ball at a box, okay? So again, all that's to say there's some simple ways to get in those carbohydrates and a little bit of protein. The third way would be a piece of fruit, like a banana, orange, or an apple. You can get to a point where you're just utilizing that quick energy source. You're just really looking for that carbohydrate. I do this at halftime on my soccer games. I eat a banana every week. It's one of my favorite things to do. It's just that banana tastes so good after 20 minutes of competitive soccer at 41 years old. So those are a couple examples for each one. Again, kind of the 2 to 3 hour range, the within 2, and then within an hour. Any thoughts, corrections, adjustments on that, Danielle?
No, I like it. I like how some of those you can pack. I mean, most of them should be packable. I remember last summer was our first season of swim team. And I was like, wow, you really got to have some cooler space for this. I mean,
Right.
It was swim meets are unfortunately quite long. But yeah, you can put sandwiches in the cooler or an ice pack. You can put, even if the cereal's without milk, you can still use that. The peanut butter and jelly or almond butter and jelly that you mentioned, sandwich. So you can obviously pack fruit. Those are pretty easy. So that's super important to think about what you can travel with more easily. Yeah.
True. And so with that, I think, Danielle, if we want to kind of tag team the back half of this question, which I love, I seriously love the back end, which is, let me get to the actual question here. So she said, what are some things that I can also use with him to help him understand why nutrition is important in helping feel and play better? And Stacia, I love this question. Thanks for asking this component of the question. So Danielle, you got some thoughts on that? I've got a couple too.
Yeah. I think the classic things to say is it's healthy, they're good for you, but actually that doesn't give the child very much motivation. That's not honing into their interests. What are your child's interests that can be more motivating to them. So my kids are younger, 6 and 4. And so we just start with, the things that they're already eating. You also don't want to do this at the table when they're not wanting something. That's called positive pressure. And that actually causes them to eat less. So I do want to have a whole episode on this topic for sure, but just to keep it short and sweet, if the child is not eating chicken, for example, the last thing you need to do is be like, that chicken's really good for your muscles because I tried this. Me personally tried this with Carter. It did not work. It wasn't chicken. I don't remember what food it was. But if you do that, the positive pressure actually makes it worse, harder if you have like a picky eater. So always, start with the foods that they are enjoying and tell them what's good about it. So your carbohydrates, these are your energy-based foods. Say, this food, you are eating that cereal. Do you love it? It's going to help you jump higher. It's going to help you run faster. And then, if they're eating chicken, that's going to give you some strong muscles. You're going to be able to hit that ball farther. If they're drinking milk with breakfast, you can say, that's That's good for your strong bones, and when they get older, if you like to nerd out about this a little bit, you can do that as well and say, milk has calcium and vitamin D, and that's what causes the strong bones. Or chicken
I still
has
tell myself
protein.
that every time I have milk.
Chicken has
you, Mark.
protein, and that's what gives you some strong muscles. So, you can go on and on. Peppers have vitamin C, and that helps you from not missing a practice so you don't get sick. So yeah, getting into their specific motivating factors. And Mark, you have a 9-year-old, so you talk about that kind of.
Yeah. So I've got a 12-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 6-year-old. And my 9-year-old's about to turn 10 at the time of this recording. But yeah, know that sweet spot, know that age, know that intelligence level. And they're at that age where that becomes kind of some of what I call the why. Find your 9-year-old's why. Not the why behind the food necessarily, but the why behind the activity. Okay, so ask him about why do you like, let's use soccer. It's just an example in our house because we're a big soccer family. Why do you like
this
soccer?
This 9-year-old does play soccer.
And he
plays
does,
soccer and hockey.
Oh, okay. So that's right. So, okay, great. Soccer's perfect. The beautiful game. It's the best one on the planet, if you ask me. And so ask him first, why do you love soccer? Well, I love being on a team. I love running. I love, he might not say it in these words, but I love the endorphin, right? I love just the energy that I feel, or I love kicking the ball. I love, passing and defending and that sort of
making
stuff.
Making a goal.
What's that?
It's all about making a goal for my kids.
It's all about making a goal or stopping goals or what, and so one of my boys is a goalie. My older one's a goalie, and he loves, that's his whole world is not allowing goals, but what do you think helps you, be better at that or perform better, right? Hard work, of course. Yeah. Muscular endurance, cardiovascular, you don't have to use the big words, but you like running, be faster than the other players. You like being stronger, when you do have some contact, et cetera, et cetera. So you find their why behind that. And you say nutrition is one of the tools that helps you literally and figuratively grow into this even more so. And so nutrition, well, think about this. Again, I don't think this is, I think 9-year-olds can grasp this. Heck, I know a lot of adults that don't grasp this yet, and they have to be educated on this. But keep in mind that exercise doesn't build the body up. So like that soccer game doesn't make him stronger necessarily. It might condition you in a certain state, but activity and working out and training actually breaks your body down. Okay. That's why we can't do it. You couldn't just run for 18 days in a row, right? It breaks down your body, and your body can't withstand that. So exercise actually breaks the body down. Nutrition builds it back up. And that's key. Like even in a weightlifting environment, I teach what's called tear and repair. You're tearing your muscles at the gym. You're not building them at the gym. You're tearing them down. You're putting micro tears in the fibers. It's nutrition that builds it back up in the recovery. So all that's to say, if your boy loves soccer and he wants to be bigger, faster, stronger than the other team, score more goals than the other team, the exercise, the training is great, the conditioning is great, the skill work is great, the ball handling is great, but just know that nutrition is going to amplify those results. And so if his goal is to get better, nutrition is one of the things that helps him get better. And so a couple other things that I talk about with whether it's kids or adults is nutrition is offensive, right? So your boy at this point understands there's an offense and a defense in virtually every game on the planet, right? So offense is out there scoring points. Defense is trying to stop people from scoring. And so thinking of nutrition as offense, which is this is one of the ways you go make points to become better at soccer, is offensively attacking nutrition and doing it as part of your training. And that's the second thing is starting that conversation of nutrition is training. It is part of the training process. It is. And by the way, ask him who his favorite athlete is. Ask him who his favorite soccer player is, right? Is it Mbappe? Is it Ronaldo? Like who is your favorite player? Is it Messi? Those guys take nutrition seriously. You don't see it because you just see them on the field, But you need to know that they are working with a dietitian, they are working with a sports nutritionist. They are eating a certain way to fuel their performance behind the scenes. That's the thing, is when we watch sports, that's what we don't see. We don't see the other 6.5 days of the week where those guys are on very purposed nutrition regimens in concert with their fitness. So thinking about it that way, that nutrition is offensive. You're out there, when you eat this stuff after a game, you're scoring a point. Okay, it's fueling performance. It's building you up, and perhaps most important in the post is, and in the recovery, we could talk about the post activity food as well. It's preparing you for the next activity, right? So did you have fun playing that game? Let's start getting your body ready for the next one, right? Because what makes me excited, the best part of my Sunday is, well, it's church, it's family, it's all that. But okay, for this episode, it's soccer. Okay, one of the best things about my week is soccer. And when that game is over, I immediately start looking forward to the next week. I'm 41 and this is still my brain, right? So like with a kid, it's just like, can't wait for that next game. So execute on that excitement, right? If they lose the game, it's like, all right, hey, let's start preparing for the next game. We're going to go back. We're going to get them next week, right? Let's use nutrition to start building you up bigger, faster, stronger for the next game. If they win, execute on that too. Hey, let's keep this momentum going. Let's go score a point with nutrition now so that we're ready for this next game. And so speaking of that, post-recovery, I would say is back to mostly that 2 to 3 hour window before methodology, which is you're back to your major macronutrients. You're back to your carbohydrates, your protein. And I wouldn't say you have to go as heavy on your fat in a post-recovery. There's been a lot of chatter about, fats post-workout slow down digestion, and they inhibit nutrient absorption, et cetera, et cetera. And it is true that fat can slow absorption, but it doesn't reduce the benefits. So all that's to say, I would still focus on carbohydrates. I would still focus on protein in the recovery phase. This is after activity. And then also have some fat. It may not be as much fat as you had, 2 to 3 hours prior to the game. It's slightly reduced in that sense, but you're right back to your major macronutrients because this is what drives health. This is what drives performance. This is what drives the body to perform and recover. So those are kind of my notes. Thoughts, Danielle?
It's great. It's great.
We did it.
Did you have some examples for after just a typical dinner? Like, did you have
I would go back to just kind of, again, then it's that, without that lingering, I'm about to play an event, right? For me, it's just back to preferred sources of those macronutrients. So I didn't list out any examples in my notes. But then it's just back to focusing on those macronutrients, whatever that looks like. There's just lots of freedom. You're not coming up against a game in a couple hours. And so just you have freedom in that regard to say kind of what's his favorite carb, favorite protein, what's a fat that he loves. That's ultimately what's most important to me is his preference in the post-recovery or in the post-activity recovery. Get whatever he loves most that checks those 3 boxes because just getting those nutrients in is going to be most important. So,
Yeah.
Cool. Well, with that, Stacia, hope that helps. Hopes the little guy has a good soccer season, whether he's playing now or in the fall. If you're listening to this, hopefully, again, even if you don't have kids, this stuff applies to you as well. So if you're like me, you're an old man out there still kicking a ball around, playing sports, or you're just a highly active parent, like Danielle, myself, my wife, her husband. Just staying active is key, and so hopefully some of these pointers help you with that. Fuel your body for performance, and then let it recover properly. So if this was helpful, thanks for listening. We'd love for you to just subscribe and leave a review. Let us know how we're doing, and share this episode with a friend. If you've got a friend that's got little kids that are active and curious about how to optimize nutrition for the purposes of helping their child perform for activities, share this episode with them. We would be honored to help as many people as we can. If you're on social media, you can follow us at Imago Nutrition, at Imago, IMAGO Nutrition. And thanks again, as always, to Happy Pill for our theme song, Thinkin Bout Food. We'll see you next episode.
Thinking about food. Thinking about food.